Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Radio 2 classes. This is lesson 26 out of 84 lessons that we're having together, and we're in the process of chatting about practical programming and making content. Part 9 of 15. Today's lesson is more practical than it is going through your content. We did that in lesson 25. However, I will revise what you need to do in this lesson, which we'll revise again in class. And what I also want to do is thoroughly go through your assessment that was marked and go through some of the challenges that the learners faced and go through some really good questions that you guys had answered. So to revise your practical programming and making content, I'm going to need you to turn to your Beyond Radio textbook and turn to page 62. In the meantime, let's go through this quote. Radio communication utilizes the theater of the mind, and the people on the radio must talk in pictures. This same principle applies to all material written and produced for on-air use as well. Remember, back in the day, radio was predominantly audio, still is, but you find that a lot of radio stations are starting to incorporate some visual elements where they're recording their presenters in studio so that they can post these videos on Instagram or snippets of them on TikTok, on Facebook, and quite popularly now, they're posting their videos on YouTube. But if somebody is listening to you in the car, they need to be able to picture whatever it is that you are painting. So you need to be very descriptive when you're speaking on air. Now, what I'm going to need you to do is to find a topic that interests you and write and perform 2 talk radio links based on your subject. The format of the links are found on page 62 of your Beyond Radio textbook. Let's go through them quickly. Content plus formatics equals ratings. In addition to your content and style, here are some talk radio basic formatics that make a difference and get you ratings. Before each break, remember to tease what is coming up or reset your talkable topic or engaging question. Remember, you need to keep people hooked onto this topic that you're chatting about. So you need to be dropping some breadcrumbs for them to stay there. You need to use a tease to entice them in order to come back. Involve your audience. Use a cliffhanger to keep them coming back for more, staying through a break, or just listening longer. Always reel your audience in. Always remind them that you are talking to them and them alone. Never leave your audience out. After each break, briefly reset your topic. A reset should include your name, right, which is the presenter, your dial position, the radio station that they are listening to, and the different platforms that you could find the radio station, the topic. Ask your focused question or tease, preferably one that everyone is listening to or will have a burning desire to answer. Reveal your phone number as well. Remember, you might know the phone number, but it doesn't mean that somebody who's tuning in for the very first time is. So you constantly need to be throwing in your phone number to remind your audience of where they can call in for their opinion. Time check. This is if it's very important. If it's a primetime show that needs people to be at certain places at a certain time, then you definitely need to reveal the time. Now, here's an example on page 63. In case you've just joined us, it is 21 minutes after 6. I am James Johnson, and you are listening to WXYZ AM 690. Our guest is supermodel Christy Christensen, talking about her new book, Sleep Your Way to the Top. What do you think about using sex to get the job? Call us at 666-8255. At first, working with formatics is a struggle. Check yourself regularly, keep practicing, and you'll notice an improvement. When someone comes up to you in the hall and says, you make it sound so easy, you will know that you have mastered formatics. So let's go through that example very quickly and see what this example has applied in terms of your formatics. All right, so here it says, in case you've just joined us, right? You are railing in your audience, and many people could be joining in for the first time. So you're saying to them, hey, don't worry. If you've just joined us right now, this is what I'm going to be letting you know or letting you in on, right? You time checking. You're saying that it is 21 minutes after 6. Very crucial for people that are on the go, on the run, that need to leave their house at this specific time. I am James Johnson. There you go, a name revealed. This is who people are talking to. So if somebody wants to speak about this a topic they heard on radio, they can say, I was listening to James Johnson. And you are listening to WXYZAM 690. That is the dial position of the station. You are listening to Metro, you're listening to Y, you're listening to 947, etc. Our guest is supermodel Christy Christensen, talking about her new book, Sleep Your Way to the Top. Already I am taken as an audience member. I am hooked just based on the title. Now I'm being railed in the next part of this example. What do you think about using sex to get the job? I'm being asked as an audience member what my opinion is, right? And again, what I really love about this question, and this is a lesson that I was taught quite early in my radio career, that in order for a question to be engaging, make sure that the question is not a yes or no question, but instead can be elaborated on, right? So what do you think about using sex to get your job? You can mention that you don't think it is a terrible idea because sex is work. You can say, oh no, I have certain beliefs and morals, and I do not believe that this is something that needs to be done in order for one to get a job. So again, it's not a yes or no question, which allows your audience member to engage in the topic more. How do you get your audience members to be engaged a lot more in this topic? Well, they can call you, they can send you a WhatsApp, they can tweet you, depending on where you want your responses. And here it says call us at 666-8255. All right, so if your audience member wants to really be involved in this topic, it's something burning, they've experienced this before, then they really want to share their opinions, then this is the number to dial. If you remember these basics, then you should be great. We did mention in previous classes that doing formatics can get a little bit boring and can get a little bit frustrating, but it is important because you can't assume that people that are listening to your show have always been listening, and you can't assume that they know who you are. So you genuinely need to give them these formatics, even though they could be boring to you. Find ways to make them interesting. You can do them at the beginning, you can do them in the middle, you can do them at the end. Make it fun, make it engaging, as it is your role as a presenter to do so. Something that really stood out for me on this is that you need to air check yourself regularly. So air checking is when you are probably sitting in with your programming manager, station manager, whoever is in charge of air checking you at that moment, and let them air check you and give you tips on how you could have done better or what you're doing well in your presentations, just so that you're able to do better, to improve, and to be the best that you can be. So what I'm going to need you to do is to take this example and take what we've learned from Beyond Radio textbook, as well as what we've learned in the previous lesson. And I'm going to need you to find a topic that interests you and write and perform 2 radio links based on your subject. I want to also entice you and say, give me a link that is a promise, that is a tease, and then give me a performance. We'll go through those in class and we'll get feedback from the rest of the class as well. All right, so that is the lesson for today. However, what I wanted us to really focus on today is your feedback that it comes from your assessment 1. I really want to go through what you've done well. I also want to go through how you could have done better in this assessment. On average, I think students that, again, I repeat, I've been attending class, did do well in this assessment, and I'm finding that a lot of students are basically touching more on the content that they've learned either in first year or even in your second year, but you're not able to apply it in real life situations. So I'm going to take you through the brief, and I'm going to tell you what I expected of you for the assessment. All right, let's look at question 1.1.1. What does RAMS stand for? I found a lot of people writing paragraphs when it came to this question, and I did mention that the mark allocation is important. That question is out of 1 and it is asking you, what does RAM stand for? So all I needed from you was to give me what that acronym stands for, and you get your mark. 1.1.2 says identify how the BRC attempts to avoid a demographic bias. I gave a mark for those that sort of explained what a demographic bias is and attempted to tell me how the BRC does it. However, I wanted a lot more from students in terms of the research of what they do and the practicalities and the sampling that the BRC does. So I found a lot of students didn't understand what demographic bias was, and that's what I needed to earn you your first point. And, there are a lot of students that gave me good examples about, which shows that they attended class, gave me good examples about how the BRC ensures that, demographic bias doesn't necessarily occur, when it comes to surveying people using paper and not technology. But I really needed the PPS sampling in this question. Question 1.1.3 says, explain how a relatively small sample is able to represent a whole population. Again, guys, I did mention that when it came to question 1, a lot of the answers really were in your textbook. You just needed to read those pages in order for you to answer. And I gave you a mark for telling me how, a sample is derived, and then I gave you for answering that question correctly. Question 1.1.3 for me was the most basic one, and you literally got 5 marks just for stating what was in your textbook exactly. You literally needed the 5 RAMS diary data points that were written in your textbook. You didn't need to elaborate. You really didn't need to, emphasize on what those points meant. I gave you a mark for simply stating what they are. All right. You are tasked with performing the research that will be used to prepare for a brand new breakfast show on BMH Radio. The highlight here, guys, being a breakfast show, being BMH Radio, which is a community radio station, campus radio station, etc. Create a qualitative survey comprising 4 powerful qualitative questions. This survey is intended to reveal the radio listening preferences of the respondent. All right. So again, I did find some outliers, students who were giving me yes and no questions, right? And we mentioned that when it comes to qualitative questions, the answers are different across the board from different people. There could be similarities. So I was very impressed with those students who asked 10 people those questions, and wherever they found similarities, they created data points and therefore created pie charts and graphs. So I was very happy with that. However, I found a lot of students not necessarily understanding this question, which we went through in class. And what I required here was for you to ask or conduct these 4 qualitative questions. Right? And I needed them to have an answer outside of yes or no. And if perhaps you did have a question that said yes or no, maybe you added explain why, then I gave it to you because it was a qualitative question. All right. So that's what I needed in that regard. I needed a question, or 4 questions rather, where somebody was going to give me answers outside of yes and no. Now it says, conduct a survey with 10 of your classmates at BMH and represent the survey data. So representation of the survey data, more than it being in a pie chart and in a graph, I needed you to analyze what the basic response is from your peers. Again, not all the answers are the same, but there were definitely similarities, and I was very impressed with students that were able to do that. Yes, it was out of 6, but it required quite a lot of work. But if you did it correctly, you definitely earned your 6 marks. Now, this for me was probably the easiest question I think that was given to you, because how a composite listener is defined, again, is in your textbook. And the 5M listeners' mentality and ideas and beliefs for me could be quite close to your BMH student. So I do believe that, you could have literally derived some of the points from the textbook. All right, so I needed you to give me a student and what they do and what they love. However, the rubric stated that it required certain beliefs for you to elaborate on. All right, so let me go and check out what those were. It needed you to tell me about relationships, again, well defined in your textbook. And if you gave me 2 of them, you earned your 2 marks. It needed you to tell me about sex, sexual orientation, gave me 2, and I gave you your 2 marks. It needed you to tell me about family, about this individual that you needed to identify and give a name to. And then you needed to give me their beliefs about education as well as their online life. And if you gave me 2 of each, you basically earned your points. And I do think that it was a very easy example because the exact points that you required could have been derived from your textbook. All right. To successfully deliver a winning breakfast show, it is important to understand our competitors using the available statistics on the BRC website. Detail the radio stations that your composite listener might be listening to right now. Consider age, location, and other demographic information. Again, another issue that I picked up with a lot of students with this question is a lot of them, would not even look or consider a breakfast show. And again, it says, what competitors could we be looking at? What is a typical BMH radio student listening to if they're not listening to BMH? Consider their age, consider where they stay, consider their interests. And if you gave me stations such as YFM, Metro, even Enukosi, I could have given you the marks. And I needed you to find some similarities when it came to their SME, their age, their location, their population, the types of devices that they use to listen to the radio. Then I definitely would have given you the mark. The biggest challenge with this question is I found a lot of students didn't go to the BRC website because you literally needed to deduce this information from the website in order for you to come up with that conclusion. So I find that a lot of students didn't go there. But if you did give me other competitors, I gave you a mark for identifying at least 2 competitors, even though you didn't give me a complete breakdown of the different demographics that were there. All right, on to question 2. Prime Media, one of SA's largest privately owned media houses, wants to bring Beyonce's Renaissance tour to Johannesburg. As part of their deal, they want the show to be broadcast live on KFM and 947. In order to have this project approved, you must provide justification to the company's board. Explain to the board why the average 947 listener and KFM listener would enjoy the concert OB experience as opposed to a regular programming. Again, I found a lot of students who were great at explaining what an OB was and why an OB is so different from normal programming. But I think a lot of students failed to tell us why Beyonce is such a perfect fit for a 947 audience and a KFM audience. So I needed you to justify why Beyonce, because we need to convince the board why bringing such an iconic individual to South Africa is important. Looking at KFM and 947, they are pop stations. So I needed you to play around that. Beyonce is a pop star. So I needed you to really, entice the board about why bringing Beyonce would be great. Again, I didn't find a lot of difficulty with the students when it came to why an OB experience is better than normal programming. So I think when it came to that question, the marks were quite fair. You'll also need to create a technical rider for the OB to the board, explain what equipment you would need to broadcast this OB live. Again, guys, the highlight here, and I keep saying again, guys, because I've been emphasizing this in class. When they say a technical rider, it is very specific. Right, it's talking about the technology that is needed in order for this OB to go live. So I needed you to mention things like microphones and cables. I even gave you a mark for saying the OB van because none of this equipment would be there without an OB van. I needed you to mention, a pack of batteries as backup, some CDJs, a sound mixer, some speakers, even for instance. I would have given you the mark. But I found that a lot of students really derailed from a technical rider and gave me other examples. But those that understood the question got their full 8 marks. Knowing you're studying radio, one of your family members complained to you saying they have heard Lizzo's To Be Loved 8 times in the past 3 days on their local AC station. They've suggested that the presenter has limited music taste. The family member wants to know, does the individual presenter choose their own music? Answer yes or no, explain the process, and identify the key technologies involved in the process. All right, guys. We've gone through this question quite extensively in class, mentioning that, presenters don't choose their own music. They can every now and again, depending on a feature, ask the music department to, put in certain songs on the playlist, but the presenter doesn't pick their own music. I had some students trying to derail from the question, saying that to some degree presenters choose their own music. I found that as a very tricky thing to mark. So I needed to read more to see if you needed to earn your mark. But the answer I was looking for here was either a yes or a no. And we've identified that obviously there is the programming manager and the music department that schedules music. There are processes that go into it. A lot of you were mentioning how people are surveyed, how they are put into an auditorium, and they need to select the type of songs that they like. But I was also looking for key technologies and the software that is used. So a lot of students probably got this question correct, but they didn't tell me about the key technologies involved in the process. The keyword here being technologies. So what software systems are used in order to select music? And if you provided that, then I gave you the mark. Imagine you are the station manager at BMH Online Radio and there is a refurbishment of the broadcast studios taking place. There's been a budget approval for a new playout system. Of the following options, which is the best suited for BMH Radio? Provide 3 reasons. Okay, so Genesis was the answer. And I remember saying to people that the key component of why Genesis is the answer is because BMH is an online campus radio station. So when it comes to budgets and advertising, they're not earning as much as other radio stations that are making money on a commercial scale. So Genesis would have been a more suitable one. And, the crazy part is BMH uses Genesis right now. And I've encouraged students to go to BMH and learn more about how the radio works. So I was looking for Genesis because it's more affordable and the other key components that were necessary. But that should have been the answer that triggers you, is that it is more affordable. And if you're a campus radio station, if you are an online radio station with limited budgets, then Genesis is your queen. Question 3, you've been appointed as the producer of BMH Radio's new breakfast show, Highlight. You're in the process of developing a new content schedule and are relying on the GIFts system developed by Tracy Johnson. What does GIFts stand for? Provide an example of one content feature that would fit into each GIF category. So those that knew the answer. I've also heard from a lot of students who are telling me that you guys did this concept back in first year. So a lot of you should have been very familiar with this. So I gave you marks for identifying what each letter in the acronym stands for. Already, that's 2 marks. But then I also gave you on ticks. If you gave me examples of each, right? So even if you weren't being very specific, you didn't have to say the 947 10K pop quiz. If you just said a pop quiz, you get your answer. Information, if you mentioned news, any sort of news, local news, I would have given you the answer. A lot of you really mentioning pranks for funny, which was absolutely great. And stories again, you just needed to give me an example of what stories you would tell. And again, you got your answer. I do believe this one got a lot of students' marks up because you did this concept back in first year. The ones that didn't get marks in this regard really stated to me that they didn't understand the concept and they didn't understand it as well in first year. So I encourage those students to go through this concept again. Next question. Listen to 1 hour of a South African commercial radio breakfast show and respond to the following. Draw a clock of the hour you listened. Include all the elements you have heard on the show. Again, the ones that really were involved in creating a clock in class understood this question because we did it as one of the last components before you had to submit your assessment. What I found is that a lot of students didn't listen to 1 hour of radio, and those that found that it was too late to listen to radio ended up listening to a afternoon drive time show or listening to Weekend Breakfast. And again, we've never really spoken about Weekend Breakfast. We've mentioned that the difficulty with that is that Weekend breakfast shows don't necessarily carry all the elements throughout the different hours. So I really encourage students to listen to, weekday breakfast shows, because they carry so many more elements as opposed to a weekend breakfast show. Those that gave me a drive time show, I obviously couldn't give you the mark for listing it, but I gave you a mark if you had certain components that I was requiring. So I was quite lenient when it came to this question. But definitely what I was looking for in terms of you obtaining your marks was top of the hour. I needed news. I needed news. I needed traffic. If you had put weather there, I would have, given you the mark. Bottom of the hour, I needed a full sports bulletin. I needed news headlines. I needed spot breaks before your news. I needed traffic. I needed weather. And in between, I needed your links and I needed your music breaks. What I found is two extremes where we found people that didn't fill the hour of the radio show, and then we found people that overloaded the hour. And the last session we had when we worked on clocks, I said to the students, you need to be cognizant of what a full hour is, right? A full hour is 60 minutes. So if you're going to have news at the top of the hour, then news needs to be about 6 to 7 minutes long, right? And then you can have your song that's about 3 minutes long. Then you can have your first link. Then you can have a song. Then you can come back for another link. I had people that literally had 3 hours worth of content in the first 30 minutes of the show. So what I was also looking for is that your work was coherent, that I was able to see and it made sense to me when it came to your clock and what you had put in there. I found a lot of students, because they wanted to collect marks, they had put in spot breaks in very awkward spaces in the hour, which I found that students should have been more aware of where they put their spot breaks. Spot breaks are not necessarily things that people want to hear, your adverts. So put them in areas where people are almost forced to listen to them, because whatever's coming on the other side is what they love, right? So definitely have a spot break just before, your news at the top of the hour, or just before your headlines at the bottom of the hour. Because people are waiting to hear news, they'll automatically hear the adverts. All right, so I found that people sporadically put things in a clock for the sake of putting it. So I penalized you for that, but I really did try to find some marks as well in your clock. All right, so this is where I said I've removed marks that had not been a primetime breakfast show, which is naming the station, the show, identifying all the characters of the show, and giving the date and hour you listened to the show. Guys, listen, or rather read the question carefully so that you can obtain all your marks. This is a very simple question, but I found people that also didn't put in the date or the hour, or didn't put all the characters. So you lost marks, simple marks that you could have obtained in this question. Pick a piece of content you heard on the show and answer the following question. Describe the content piece in detail and describe which gifts it would belong to and why. I found a lot of people using elements that are already on the clock and using that as content, and I didn't give you the marks for that. So if you said news at the bottom of the hour, yes, it's news, it's information, but those are not content pieces. They're elements that need to be there for the show. So if you did that, I didn't give you the marks, but I found quite a lot of you that understood the concept of what gifts is, even gave me more than, what a certain content piece would consist of, which I really liked, because it meant that you understood the question very well. All right, did this content piece fit the station's format? Why or why not? I found, again, a lot of students who weren't able to understand what format is, who weren't necessarily understanding whether the content piece is aligned with the station, and that's what I needed more from you. Right, was this content piece effectively teased? Explain why or why not. I found a lot of you saying yes or no, but not telling me why. So again, I needed to really read through and see if you deserved the marks or not. But again, those that understood the question did very well there. Did the performance deliver on the promise? Explain why or why not. Something we did in class. Again, you needed to explain what the performance was and if the performance lived up to your expectations, to the amazing teas that you probably could have heard. So again, guys, I think this assessment was really easy if you're coming to class and asking all the relevant questions. But all in all, your second year is really about taking information that you're learning from the textbook and personalizing it and adapting it to real life. Question 1, I think, was predominantly straight out of the textbook, but when it came to question 2 and question 3, we needed to see that you are understanding the content that you're learning and applying it to real life scenarios. So we'll work more on that. We'll do better in other classes with that. But overall, I think a fantastic attempt from the students. And I encourage you to attend class, because that's where you get to ask all the relevant questions and you also get to flourish and do well in your assessment. The next assessment that's coming up requires even more of your thinking. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you know where to reach me, nonhlanhla@boston.co.za, or you can send me a message on the Radio 2 WhatsApp group. Otherwise, see you next time.